Shulchan Aruch. I was in the synagogue across the street from my office here, and they have a camp from the United States that's studying in the synagogue over there where I sometimes daven. And they're also learning, I saw they had printed up, they're also learning the same chapter 80 of the of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, because it's very important for the laws of Shabbos. It covers most of the details of the laws is in chapter 80. Okay, so I believe we're holding, let's do over quickly, law number 32. It says like this: Beged, a garment or clothing that, hold on a second, a garment that has dirt. You should clean it with a rag. Again, we learned this just following up. You don't pour directly water on the clothing, because the pouring the water is a form of washing. If a child urinates on a clothing, you cannot pour water directly on the clothing, but you can use a small rag, to kind of wipe it down. But if he urinates on the ground or on a wooden vessel or the hide of an animal, the skin, so obviously in such a way you could pour the water to kind of so it shouldn't be a puddle of urine. And if a person washes one's hands, obviously when you go to the restroom or what have you, and you want to dry your hands with a towel, better before on Shabbos to try to kind of get rid of as much water before you actually place your hands on the towel. So it should be a little or less water on your hands. Because that little water that he's drying, because it was dirty, your hands were dirty, so that's not a way of washing. We're talking about a white towel, where the white towel, and this is we're focusing on the concern of washing. So the white towel is what you can think that one's trying to clean with water, whereas it comes to a colored towel, it's less of a concern. Okay, again, quickly, which I hope the footnotes are short here. It says it may be wiped down lightly, as not to squeeze the dirt out of the garment, of a form of washing.
What about the smell?
Sorry?
Getting rid of the smell
of
the urine from the white towel.
No. He's talking. He says that if you, first of all, a smart tooth is a rag. A rag is not a towel. You don't wash your hands with a towel. You wash your hands with the rag. You wash your hands with the towel. You don't wash your hands with the rag. When you're talking about, let's say, to get the urine off the clothing, that's with the rag. You just have to throw the rag in a place where you could clean it after Shabbos. But a towel, which is that you don't treat a towel like a rag. So there maybe, and it's more of a, so I would say, a quality item. So then you would say that, maybe one's concerned that you're trying to clean it, but there's no concern or it doesn't look like washing when it comes to a rag. A rag is meant to be dirty, so to say, and you every once in a while you throw it in the washing machine, but it's not like you're trying to clean it to be nice. That's the same reason why colored people also wash their colored towels. But it's not. So, for instance, a dirty white towel you wouldn't want in your kitchen doesn't look nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this rule applies to other liquids as well, obviously not just urine or water. 123 is, see paragraph 40 for details about leather and plastics, which doesn't absorb the water. Sorry. 124 is, okay, Shulchan Aruch 30210, the ruling accommodates the opinion of the Ye'arim that even as part of the soiling process is forbidden, even if the towel is clean anyways. This is a proper custom, but according to halacha, it is permitted to dry your hands even when all the water is on them, and even with an unclean towel. So even if it's a clean towel, that's surely it's better. It's less of a concern of washing. But even a dirty towel, and it looks like maybe you're washing, this is just something extra to try to clean off your hands from water or to dry off your hands before you place it in a towel. But halachically means, according to the strict letter of the law, it's not a deal. You shouldn't be stressed out about it if you didn't do it, or if you can't find a clean towel, even if it's a dirty towel, and maybe the water that you're using in your hand is some form of washing it. It's not the typical way. It's not how one washes it, and therefore halachically, the strict letter of the law, it's not an issue. So he's referring to the mention of trying to dry your hands off before you apply them to the towel, the white towel. Okay, now this is what we're holding. Law number 33. So we have two issues over here that we're discussing. One issue is this a form of washing? And the other one is the issue of saturating the towel, what have you, in water, and then the concern of squeezing. Squeezing is also, that's also a concern. So there's two separate issues here. So here we have if you have a barrel that has water in it. You can't, let's say you just want to spread a sheet on top of it. You're not allowed to. If it's not the assigned cover for this barrel. Why? Because the assigned cover of the barrel, that's its job. So you're not going to be squeezing it. A towel that or let's say a sheet or something, afterwards you may end up, it's going to get wet, and then you're going to want to squeeze it out. So the concern is you may end up squeezing it. So like I said before, that it's only talking about a non-typical cover. So therefore, you making a makeshift cover, and therefore, after you finish covering it, you may squeeze it out. But it's cover, that's what it's designed for, and therefore there's no concern that you would squeeze it out. So again, here's the concern of squeezing out. And Rebecca asked the questions. I forget if Rebecca, you asked it in the class or privately, but you asked the question about, I think it was on the class last time or a few times ago, about applying paper towels on Shabbos. So there's the idea of better using paper towels for certain things, because paper towels, and because it's not reusable, it's disposable, so it's less likely that you're going to squeeze them out. People don't squeeze out and rinse out their paper towels. Where a regular towel, if let's say you have a huge spill on your floor, so you're going to squeeze out the water. Whereas if it's a paper towel, it's less likely to be squeezed out. Law number 34. This is where the question that Rebecca was asking. Let's say water spills on the table. It happens all the time, or similar situation. When he means similar, he means something that you want to dry up. So in such a case, also do not use a garment or something that you're careful about. Means you don't want to use it just under the circumstances, the water spills. So you can grab something that later you're going to want to dry out, and you're going to want to squeeze it out. The kivin dikamayim, because we're talking about a larger spill, you're going to squeeze it out, right? Sometimes people get trigger happy, and they grab first thing they could get their hand on, and they realize it's a nice towel or a nice napkin, and it was a bad move, and you squeeze it out. So Shabbos, you're not allowed to squeeze out. So therefore, it's you have to be careful not to use a garment that you're makbid, that you're careful about, because you may come to squeezing it out. Also, there's another concern. When you have a narrow entrance of, let's say, of a vessel or a cup, that when you're trying to put in a towel to dry out the inside of the cup, the problem is, because of its narrow space, just by putting in and out the towel into that space is cause the waters to squeeze out. And that's forbidden on Shabbos. So it says, don't use a towel for cups or other vessels that they're opening their mouth, meaning to say, is now because by default, even if you don't want to, but because it's narrow, it's going to squeeze the towel going in and out, which will cause the waters to squeeze out. So law number 25. So footnote number 125. If the garment is dirty, even if it has no value, it is forbidden for soaking, like For soaking is like washing. So here, the Machzis HaShekel says that if you're so here we're talking about again we have two concerns here that come together when it comes to spills or stains, etc., which is the concern of washing and squeezing. And squeezing is a byproduct of washing. So it's squeezing and washing. You squeeze out garments after you wash them. So if it's a dirty towel, and you have, let's say, a big spill on the floor, the science of it is usually right that when you have water in a cup, it doesn't look like you have a lot, but when it spills on the floor, all of a sudden it becomes a lot. So when there's a big spill on the floor, and if you're going to put a dirty towel, so that's a form of washing the towel. So it's better, obviously, to use a clean towel and to be careful because you have to. If you're going to use a towel, you may end up squeezing it. So don't use a towel. It's a hard garment to find, right? If it's a clean towel, it makes sense that you're more careful about it. If it's a dirty towel, you won't care so much about it. So you have to find a towel that's not, you're not makbid on it. You don't care if it gets wet. At the same time, it's not dirty, because dirty, then you're washing it. So a clean towel that you don't mind if it gets wet. And everyone has those in their cupboard, right? When you have towels that are kind of, you won't put them out for display because they're already tearing or what have you. So they're not 100% a shmata yet. Shmata is like a rag, but they're kind of, they're towels you use for when you need to dry something. So they're not, so you don't care if it gets wet, and at the same time it's not dirty. You wash them, you keep them in the cupboard for when you need them. So something like that is what you should use when it comes to drying up things on Shabbos. 126 is talking about, yes, if it's a large spill, so then even if you're using a non so it's because it's a large spill, you have to be careful. If it's a garment of value, you may squeeze it out. If there's a tablecloth, you must also make sure not to spread the water any further. So let's say this always happens, right? So you have Baruch Hashem today, we have table protectors, right? So something underneath the tablecloth in case of spillage. When you have children, you have to take that into account. But let's say you have a tablecloth and you spill on the tablecloth directly. Excuse me. Sorry, you must also make sure not to spread the water any further. See Pri Megadim 302:12. But the Bir Halacha rules that you can be makel, means you could be lenient if necessary. If the part is spread on, if the part it is spread on is clean, so it's not like you're washing the tablecloth. So again, why shouldn't you spread it? Because it's a tablecloth, it's a nice garment, and you don't want it to get too wet because then you're going to squeeze it out. But if it's a dirty tablecloth and you're spreading the water, then the problem is that you're cleaning the tablecloth. So again, there's this kind of the balance between concern of washing something that's dirty and concern of squeezing something out that's valuable. Okay, well, that's important to you. 127. Even if they are not of any value, so you can't use a towel, because in that case, there's nothing to do with value. We're talking about the narrow cups, because when it goes in and out of the cups, it's going to squeeze, by definition, it's going to squeeze the waters out. Okay. Now is another question. This happens all the time, especially for us. When we lived in Seattle, this was a regular occurrence. We lived very far from our synagogue. My father would walk from our house to the Chabad house, which was about a 40-minute walk up and down the hills, and it was not uncommon at all to be walking home or to shul in the rain, right? Seattle rains a lot. So if you live in New York, let's say, you could, run in, you have a shul close by, but in Seattle, we walked literally 45 minutes. And here in Yerushalayim also sometimes we'll walk a long time if you go to the old city and you're walking in the rain and your clothing gets wet. So what do you do with wet clothing on Shabbos? It's not simple. A lot of times, we have guests in Seattle. We used to have guests in Seattle all the time, especially when we were growing up. They would come for a Shabbos meal and they were soaking wet, So what do you do with the clothing that get wet in the rain on Shabbos? So he says this, if a person is walking outside on Shabbos, obviously, and it starts to rain, the rain is raining on you and your clothing. So you could go to your house. It's not a problem of, say, carrying the water, or it's not a problem of etc. But when you take off your garments and you undress, You cannot spread them out. Now here, there's the problem of also maris ayin. Maris ayin means that when a person spreads them out like you would after a wash, like you spread it out like on a dry rack. So by doing that, it may look like you washed your clothing on Shabbos and now you're doing the drying part. So you're not allowed to spread them out. Let's say you're walking in the summer and it's wet from sweat. Also, you can't spread them out. The koshkein, meaning to say difference is that the rainwater is obviously semi-clean water, so then it's kind of like washing and drying. But here, sweating is obviously, anyways, you're going to have to wash them again. But nevertheless, you shouldn't spread them out. The koshkein the also lishatchan negation. Then surely, if you have an open flame or a heater, to spread them out near the heater to be dried by the heater is forbidden. Even to stand with your wet clothing by a fire to kind of dry off the clothing is forbidden. But you can't stand by a open flame or a very warm place that's very hot. Hold on, Barbara. I know this is a question that we have in Seattle all the time. It says he says it is uh, even if you are wearing them, it is forbidden. It is likewise forbidden to shake off the water from the garment. So you come home and you have a coat, you can't shake it out before you hang it up. Now, hanging it up to throw it in a pile is obviously not what you're supposed to do, but you shouldn't dry it like you would dry specifically a wash. So and let's say you have a garment, let's say it's, I was once, more than once, where I was caught off guard. In Seattle, everyone knows if it's a bad weather, you get usually heads up, it's usually overcast, and then you wear your coat. So you're not, you're going into a scenario that you're prepared for. But there does happen every once in a while, we end up in a scenario that you're not prepared for, and you don't have a raincoat. Well, you get caught if you're in Miami. I once walked from Miami on Shabbos. I didn't know that there could be sun and rain. And literally, I walked 3 blocks from my brother-in-law's house to the synagogue. And anyone who's been to Miami rain, it's like torrential rain. It's like you're going through a rainforest. And I literally came not wet. I came soaking to shul. Like literally, like just I gave up. It was just like literally as if I went swimming for an hour in the lake. It was just totally warm, hot water. I was soaking. So you have a case where you're makbid. You don't want, and I didn't want my suit, my kapata, my Shabbos garment to get wet, right? I wasn't prepared. I didn't have a raincoat. What about a clothing that you don't want it to get wet? You don't want the water to touch the garment. So then you shouldn't even carry it after you take it off. It means obviously you're allowed to take it off. Once you take it off, you shouldn't carry it because now you're really concerned about the water. Because once you're holding it, you may do something to squeeze it out. Yes, Barbara. You're on mute.
Yes, sorry. I was just going to ask. So, but if you take it off and you put it on a hanger, but you don't put it with any intention of to dry it out or anything, you're just hanging it up. Is that allowed?
Yeah, see, I actually was wondering about that. That's for sure allowed. Like I said, you're ruining your clothing if you just pile it up and it gets wet. It could get moldy and all that. So, and sometimes you'll wash your shirts and other garments and you hang them in the bathroom, right? A lot of people hang it on the rack on the railing of the shower and bathroom. That's one of the things that people do to hang their garments when they're after a wash. So even though but it's not like spreading it out like on a special washing. In Israel we have these like foldable things that after, especially in Israel, it was a luxury to have a dryer, right? And there's heat outside, so it's not like, there's plenty of outside heat to dry your clothing. So everyone has, dry hanging rack. So the hanging rack is not something you should hang on. But if you come in from the wet and you want to hang your coat, you have to hang it somewhere. So to hang it in this, you don't want to put it just on the coat rack. It's going to make the house wet. So that's not that. To hang it in the shower is normal, is a regular thing, and it's a regular thing that people do when you go to a house. It's not only a form of wash and dry. So yes, I've seen it done all the time. people hang their coats in the bathroom. The reason we hang in the bathroom is that if it drips, it should go into the bath or the shower. He says even if one is only moist from sweat. So he says, see Mishnah Brura 301 and 164 concerning infants' clothing. If they get wet, what you should do. Okay. It is forbidden to spread them out. Let's see about that, because that's really addressing Barbara's question. Someone may suspect you of washing them on Shabbos. Again, this is, again, like I said, the spreading out part is a concern of Maris Ayin. Maris Ayin wasn't in the chart we learned last week. Maris Ayin doesn't only apply to Shabbos. Maris Ayin is what Maris Ayin means, what the eye sees. And there's a lot of things that a person that the Torah says you shouldn't do because the perception you give off by doing it. So in this case, right, if you were to hang your wet garments on a dry rack, you didn't wash it, you got wet in the rain. But someone who walks by your house and sees especially you're not allowed to hang it out outside, so sees that there's a dry rack with clothing, may think you didn't wash that day. So that's called Marasayin. And there's a lot of laws of Shabbos, especially Shabbos, that connected to Marasayin, that even though you didn't do anything forbidden, but the eye who sees it may think that you've done something forbidden. For instance, if there's a partnership with a Gentile and they don't know there's a partnership, and your public service is open on Shabbos. Let's say you have a pool or a merachatz or a wash, something that's forbidden to do on Shabbos that's open on Shabbos. And everyone thinks you own it, so then they think you're doing business on Shabbos. There's a lot of things that are called Marasayin, and there's a lot of laws that are connected to Marasayin. For instance, if it's out of the boundaries of the city, where a Jew shouldn't be anyways, because a Jew shouldn't be leaving the city, so then there's less concern of Marasayin, because the Jew wouldn't be there. So the only person who would see it is a Gentile who we're not concerned about the Marasayin. So Marasayin has a lot of rules of what it means to what people may suspect. For instance, the suspicion that negligence of the law is not called Marasayin. If a person thinks that this law is forbidden, and by seeing you doing it may think that you're doing something wrong, that's not called Marasayin. It has to be that what they think you're doing is wrong. So there are rules to Marasayin that's discussed more in detail in the laws of Shabbos when you learn it in a more detailed way. And again, it applies to other things as well. But that's the main concern over here with leaving your clothing out to dry. That's why when I'm saying about the coat hanging in the bathroom, that's a regular thing people do when they come in from the rain. Okay, this is similar to squeezing out the water, which is what the issue is here. Likewise, forbidden to shake off the water from the garment. Okay, and then if you have something that you didn't want to get wet, only when it is very wet, where we're afraid you may do so. The Mishnah Berurah says, so he stipulates that this idea of not touching it after you take off is not if it's a little wet, but if it's soaking wet, then we're scared you may squeeze it. Okay. Like I said, this is not something that's uncommon, especially if you in your place where it rains a lot. This thing, you could experience this question all the time. The law continues. Law number 36. Okay. Let's say again, this is the question of washing and drying. If you come to you come to a stream, and you can jump, like you jump over it. Afilu hu rechava, even if it is a bit wide and maybe you missed the jump. And again, Shabbos, you have to be careful to walk unnecessary steps. Again, not to do things like in the week. So then it's better to jump than to walk around. Because then you're walking extra. Let's see the footnotes about that in a second. But you can't walk through the stream. Because then your clothing get wet, obviously very wet, and you're going to squeeze them out. And he adds to that, it is forbidden to walk on Shabbos in any place where you might slip and fall into water, because then again you may squeeze it out. You shouldn't go in a place where you may fall in. Maybe you get your clothing soaked and you will squeeze them out. Yes, Rebecca.
I'm not sure if I ever if I knew that you can't take, you're not supposed to take extra steps. So does that mean like, okay, like to go to my parents' shul, there's one route that's like more flat but longer, and then another route that's shorter, but it's like a steeper hill. So does that mean that you have to take the shorter route, even though if you don't want to take a steep hill, like what if it's like a little something that's like a little bit dangerous? Like you have to take the shorter
So,
way always?
I have to look up more details on how it says over here. It doesn't give us more details than 3013, but what you have to understand what we're talking about over here is in a case that if this same scenario happened during the week, you would jump over the stream. But because the concern of getting wet is there, so you're thinking about maybe walking around. So it's kind of Shabbos that's causing you to walk extra, that a walk that you don't want to do. So then in that case, it's better to jump over than to walk around. But during the week itself, if you were to walk to your parents' shul, you would walk the longer route because it's the easier route, then that's the way you would walk it. Means over here, it's not that Shabbos is causing you to walk longer, it's the difficulty of the hill. So then that's the way you walk, that's your way of walking. And no one's saying you have to climb and hurt yourself or stress yourself out. Here we're talking about where you have to make a decision based on what you wanting to do, what's called Shabbosdik versus getting wet. So it's the reason you'd walk around it is a Shabbos concern, not because you're scared to jump it. If you're scared to jump it, or you're elderly or not able to jump it, definitely you have to walk around it because you wouldn't jump over it in the week either. So we're talking about in a case where during the week you would go one way and it's Shabbos causing you to go another way, then go with the shorter way than the longer way. But if it's something you wouldn't do in the week either, then it's nothing to do with Shabbos. It's not that,
So
instead, that's the concern
yeah,
here.
but what about in a case where like you're not sure if your friend is home for Shabbos or not? She may be away, but in case she ended up staying for Shabbos, you want to like stop by the house to visit. So like let's say there's only a 25% chance that she's home. Are you not allowed to go because if she's not there, then it's extra steps?
No, no. Again, I think what we're talking about here. Listen, if someone it doesn't say anywhere you're not allowed to take a walk on Shabbos, everyone takes a Shabbos walk because that's part of Oneg Shabbos. It's part of enjoying Shabbos. We're talking about kind of doing something. The reason you're walking around is annoying to you. You don't
Oh,
want to
I
walk
see.
around. You want to walk shorter. But you're scared that if you jump over the thing, you may get wet and squeeze out your clothing. So you're going to walk longer. So there they say then better to jump over than to walk around. But
Okay.
anything that's part of your norm or part of Oneg Shabbos, that's part of your Shabbos experience. So if it's a regular thing to go to a friend on a small chance that they're home, that's okay. That's part of your enjoyment is to go visit people on Shabbos.
Okay, thank you.
Um, And there you can't say, just to follow up on that, there you can't say there's the issue of, well, if it wasn't Shabbos, I'd call them up and find out because that's it's regular to take a chance in something like that. And so you're okay with it. It's not annoying to you. All right. Haya haylech lidvar mitzvah. This is all talking about just regular walking. But if you're doing it for a mitzvah, going, what would be a definition of doing a mitzvah for a walk? Lahakl pnei aviv, to go greet your father. Oi rabbi, or to meet your teacher. These are all things that are nice. That's respectable. It's a mitzvah. Amisha gadol b'chachma, or not even your father or your teacher, but someone who's considered a wise person who's greater than you. Again, all basically a sign of respect. That would be the mitzvah. Yochel aver benar, then you could go through the river, even not just to jump over it, even though you get wet. Ulevad, there's some conditions. One is shiyasa shini, do a little bit of a change. The change could go in shlayetzi yadi mitachas l'sfas chalukai. He says, for example, do not remove your hand from underneath your overcoat. Whatever, some sort of sign that would remind you not to squeeze it out. Kedei sheyiskar, so you should remember v'liyavi l'schita, you shouldn't squeeze it out. So we have a lot of things that are Shabbos that if you could figure out a way to remind yourself not to do it, that's why we have a lot of people put on, things on the lights, something to remind you that you shouldn't do the transgression. So over here, there's a mitzvah. So the mitzvah overrides the concern that you may squeeze it out, but to enhance and to add to to lessen that concern is to do a shinui, to do something different, and that difference will keep you focused that you shouldn't squeeze it out by mistake. Next thing is also make sure that you know you're going on to meet your father, your teacher, someone smarter than you. Don't be wearing sandals, which are not good walking shoes. Because you can't properly tighten it because it's a sandal versus a shoe. Here the concern is it may, because you're walking through water and something may happen, the strap may break, what have you, and then you can end up carrying the sandal. So better if you're walking in a way that you're walking through the water, and water is a kind of environment that it's more likely than just a regular stroll that your sandal would rip because you don't see where you're walking. It's water, etc., etc. It's slippery. So better make sure you wear good walking shoes even if you're going to do a mitzvah. With proper walking shoes, it's okay. And here there's another interesting thing that the halacha adds. Because the whole trip was mitzvah based, and this we find in Shabbos many times, so you're even allowed to walk back after you've performed the mitzvah, after the mitzvah, right? So a person may say, well, now I can't walk back because I performed the mitzvah, and there's no mitzvah in my returning home, so I can't go through the river. So I'm stuck, right? So it says, no, you can walk through the river on the way back. Why? Because you're not going to go there if you can't walk back. So we find that many times in halacha, that when we permit something, we make a full package. You're not going to say, well, you can only go one way. This doesn't apply to everything, but this is something that's taken into consideration. For instance, if you're allowed to go with your wife, there's always the question of taking a taxi or an ambulance, depending whatever, to the hospital. And after whatever the surgery, let's say the baby was born, it's not positive, a baby's born, the father wants to go home, you can't take a taxi home because the taxi was permitted for that circumstance. And not every time do we say that the way you left is the way you come, because over here there's a gezerah. You're not doing anything forbidden on Shabbos. You may do something forbidden by drying out your clothing. Okay, so he continues, he says like this. If you are going not for the mitzvah we said before of greeting your father, teacher, or someone wiser than you, but just to go watch something that belongs to you, like your fruits. He says, the Shemirath have a gamking tats mitzvah. So here he says in the parentheses that monitoring your money, that shouldn't be a loss. Let's say make sure no one steals it, what have you, is also some sort of mitzvah to make sure that there's no loss. So in that case, because it's not such a strong mitzvah, and you decided you were nervous and you wanted to watch your stuff, so you could, or whatever the thing is, so you could go there, but you can't go back. So here, that's the difference. Means the mitzvah of going to greet your teacher or father. So if a person says, well, I want to do the mitzvah of greeting a special person, my father, my teacher, someone who's wiser than me. So if I could come back home, then I'm going to go. But if I can't come back home, I'll do the mitzvah another time. But when you have financial anxiety, which is also a mitzvah, so then the Torah says, the reason you're going is because you have financial anxiety. So if you want to go, we'll let you go. But coming back, that's going to be on you. Okay, let's see the footnotes here. 134. What are we talking about here? Then you may cross the river if you're going for mitzvah. When going to do a mitzvah, some poskim say that you may either cross the stream or go around it as you choose. Means in this case, you can walk around it. Most poskim rule that it is better to go around the stream, even though you're taking extra steps, and during the week you would walk through the water, because in this case you have options, so the concern of walking extra steps is less. Okay. 135, about difference between shoes and sandals, that's the Shulchan Aruch 314. Okay, that's the footnotes on this law. Okay, he continues. Let's do a few more laws. We're open to questions. Tit shal bigdoi. If you have mud on your clothing, that happens, right? Im hulach, if the mud is wet. So it says, it may be scraped off with a fingernail or a knife. But if it's dry, and then it's hard, and then by taking it off, you're gonna be grinding it, so to say. Also, the garde mishum to have a ketoich, and then it's a problem because it's like grinding, and grinding is forbidden on Shabbos. Okay, this happens sometimes. So he says to use a fingernail or a knife to the kind of like mud and kind of take it off is okay. 136. The act would be rabbinic prohibition. Thus, it would be permitted to tell a non-Jew to do it in order to avoid embarrassment. It means because it's a rabbinic concern of maybe grinding the mud, and you don't want to walk around with the dry mud on your clothing. So in that case, it's permitted to ask directly a non-Jew to do it for you if you have that ability of the embarrassment of wearing the clothing when it's dirty. Okay, what's grinding? He says in 137. This applies only when there is a clod of dirt and not just a spot of dirt. He says why? He says, so says the Mishnah Berurah says, it's forbidden to rub off a spot of dirt because this is considered cleaning. Okay, so that itself is cleaning if it's a spot of dirt. Listen, if it's wet, it hasn't kind of yet went in, so to quickly take it off. But if it's already hardened, so the Mishnah Berurah says you can't do it. But others say that it only applies if it's a clod of dirt, not a spot of dirt. Let's do, I think, one more law. What's number 32 and 30, 32, 39 and 40? This continues with, okay, let's see how far we could get here. It says, Beged Shachar, a black garment, Asal Nari Min Hashaleg, and you have snow on it, Aymina Avak, or from the dust because it's like cleaning. Aval Hasir Mi Olav Hanoitzais Biyade, but to take off feathers that go on a black garment, it's white on black. Mutter V'yesh Chayshin Kamazai, some who are concerned about this as well. Let's see the footnotes on this. If the snow has not melted, it is permitted, but then it's considered as feathers. But if it melted, kind of then to shake it off is a problem. Again, it's more noticeable with a black garment. 132, the feathers are not embedded in the fabric, so it's less of cleaning. All right. One more. These are all scenarios that we deal with all the time, or sometimes. Tit shal raglav eminalev. If you have mud on your foot or shoes, you could take something that's permitted to hold, means not muktzah. You're allowed to use it to take off the mud. Or to wash it, or to kind of dry it, like to rub it on a beam. But you may not wipe it on a wall, we'll see why in a second, or the ground. But in a difficult situation, it's not just mud, but it's actually dung. You walked into someone who left had his dog took a walk. When we were kids today, it's less common. People are more sensitive about cleaning up after their animal. But when we were kids growing up, that didn't exist. When you walked to Shul on Shabbos, then the grass specifically, and sometimes the sidewalks were full of what we call dog dew, and we would step in it all the time, unfortunately. So if it's more than just dirt, on your shoe, and you don't have anything that you're permitted to hold, like let's say a butter knife, what have you. So then you could use a wall. Okay, he continues. And if there's not a wall, better then you could even rub it on the earth. We'll see what the problem with rubbing on the earth is in a second. And if it's not something that could get squeezed out, it's like a leather shoe, then also you could just pour water on it. He says leather just to pour water on is not considered washing unless you're really rubbing it against each other, which is the way they wash the leather. But a knife is not permitted, only a permissible article. We'll see in a second the difference why a knife not. To clean shoes. He said on clothing you could use the knife, but not on the shoes. He says if there is some people had in the front of their house a little piece of metal that is specifically in the front of the house to kind of clean your shoes before you walk in. If it's sharp, you can't use it. If it's not sharp, then you can use it. Okay, let's find out what this whole law is about in 140, and we will stop here after that. 140 is like this. So then they may not be wiped on the wall. Why? This applies only to a stone wall, but on a wooden wall is permitted because a wooden wall is like a beam. It's forbidden. That was the Danian. It is forbidden. It is forbidden on a stone wall because it appears as though you are adding to the wall. It's like kind of you're putting more cement into the wall. People would use mud to help strengthen the wall. So it's like you're building on Shabbos. So that's not true. That's why we can't do it on a stone wall. But he says 141. Why can't you rub it in the ground? So we know why you can't rub it on the wall. Why can't you rub it on the ground? For by doing it, for by doing so, you may fill up a hole in the ground, and that's also a kind of prohibition on Shabbos in doing work in the ground. By rubbing on the dirt, you're kind of making a hole or filling a hole, which is prohibited. So therefore, he says you could use a utensil that's permitted to hold or a beam, but not on the wall or the grass, unless it's something that's extreme situation, like you have tsoa, you have dung, and then he says you could do it on the wall, and if not the wall, you could do it on the grass, on the dirt. 142, he says, then you may be wiped on the wall if it's like dung. The Mishnah Berurah rules you can rely on the vast majority of Rishonim who permit it. He says there's those who permit even doing a wall in an extreme situation, it's not a problem. What about if it is, why are you not allowed to use a knife? Even a blunt knife is forbidden. Doesn't give the reason. It says, it quotes the Gemara Shabbos in 141. I have to check that up. And 144 is talking about the metal in front of the house. So he says, if it's sharp, if it is sharp, it is prohibited. As the blunt edge of a knife. Hold on. Which part is if the iron post in front of the house that is made of for cleaning shoes is sharp, then it's prohibited because then it's like a knife. So he says what is considered sharp on something like that, even the blunt side of a knife. I mean, obviously, no one has a razor sharp piece of metal in front of the house. That'd be extremely dangerous, right? So even if it's like a blunt knife, which is not so dangerous, if you step on it, it won't cut through your feet. But the knife is not allowed to be used on Shabbos to wipe the clothing. I have to check. I checked it, and when I prepared this class a few weeks ago, and it's slipping my mind why, I will check it again and post it on the group. Okay, let's just do one last one because this deals with these laws, and then we go on to the next issue. Niskalkal yada b'tit. What happens if your hands get full of mud? Lo yikanche b'mapesh mekanche b'yadayim. The chashin and shem yichabsa. Don't wipe your hands on a clean towel or a towel that you use, because then we're scared that once you wipe it, you're going to clean the towel. Okay, so let's see 145. The Rambam, but you may use a rag that you are not concerned with, that you're going to clean it, the rag that you don't care about. Okay, so this basically finishes the laws of dealing with dirty clothing. After that, we're going to get into dyeing clothing or dyeing foods, like using saffron in cooking. And then the questions of weaving, tying knots, shoelaces, making a tie, all these things we're going to discuss. Again, this is a long chapter. I figure if anyone has any questions on what we learned on today, let me know, and that was a good time to ask. No? Oh, that's good. We had an easy class today. Hold on. If we have a second, let me just check quickly. The issue of knife on shoes. Um, okay, I'm gonna check this properly, and I can do this offhand. And I'll post it on the group. We'll discuss it next week for the live. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Laila Tov, Erev Tov. Stay safe. And for those I don't see before Tisha B'Av on the class, have a meaningful fast. Hopefully, we don't have to fast with the coming of Mashiach. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.